Well, it looks like Moana 2 is finally reaching the end of its theatrical run, or at least the part where it makes any money, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be hitting that billion-dollar mark that Disney wants it to make. Why is that? Well, we're going to talk about that here on That Park Place, and also a little bit of my review, because I was finally forced to sit through this one, and it's not great. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is Mr. VashSky. Vash, are you the demigod of the wind and sea?
I'm not sure if I'm that, but you know who really isn't the demigod of the wind and sea? Apparently Moana 2, which is not doing very well on the seas. Maybe people will be approaching those high seas in order to get their hands on it.
It's a funny thing because it is doing well, but it's not doing well at the same time. When we talk about movies doing well at the box office, generally speaking, we're talking about whether or not they have made a certain amount of money. Well, what is that certain amount of money contingent on? How much it actually costs to make the film. So here is a very positive story here, and this is amazing that it is riding high. Moana 2 riding high with 717 million global as Wicked whizzes to 525 million. Pushpa 2 record-breaking run continues. Little appetite for Craven international box office. This is Nancy Tartaglione over there from Deadline. Nancy Tartaglione often covers the international side of things, this is the number we want to focus on. It's the highest number that Disney will be able to brag about here. Here we go. Here we are in the pre-holiday period with strong returns from the top two studio titles already in the marketplace, and a not unexpected, uninspiring start from a movie that has jumped around the calendar. They're, of course, talking about Craven, which did not make much at the box office. Importantly, we are seeing strong continued play for Moana 2 and Wicked. Both films wisely took advantage of a pre-holiday corridor, otherwise known as Thanksgiving. Disney's Surfer Girl sequel continues to charm with a current international weekend of 57 million from 52 offshore markets. That is a 44% drop. The total split is now 375 domestic and 380 million from all offshore markets for 717 million worldwide. I watched some analysis from my good friend Valiant Renegade talking about this movie here. Disney has already started to pull their marketing budget from this one and started to focus over there on Mufasa, or I almost called it Mufasa 3. I don't know why that number seems to be on that. Maybe it's the fact that it's going up against Sonic 3. With that, however, Mufasa is going up against Sonic 3, which is a movie that my kids will not stop talking about. So this is armchair analysis here, otherwise known as being anecdotal. I think Sonic 3 is probably going to be like Scar, and Mufasa will claw its way up, and Sonic the Hedgehog will reach down and say, what is it that Scar says? Long live the king, and then he tosses him into the ravine to be trampled by gazelles. That's about what I'm expecting here from Mufasa and Sonic 3 at this moment.
Well, to correct you just a little bit, wildebeests actually was the
oh yeah,
that's
right.
Tossed into. But
it is wildebeest and not gazelles.
But I'll tell you this: we actually have a little bit of information on that right now. Luis Fernando talking about the pre-sales for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and also to Mufasa. Pre-sales for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 keep really strong at U.S. box office, managing to stay over 3 times better than Wonka's on its penultimate week. At the point in time when Wonka's pre-sales shot up, which is really, really impressive. But to contrast that just a little bit with Mufasa's pre-sales have slowed down considerably at the U.S. box office compared to Wonka's, as I expected to happen. The penultimate week was a turning point for Wonka, but with Mufasa, same momentum is not translating. And I think a lot of people were predicting that that Mufasa was going to have issues this winter, and that's the thing too. We bring all this up because, well, not only is Disney likely to be transitioning with its marketing towards Mufasa from Moana, but also too Lin-Manuel Miranda. We keep bringing this up, but I think it's so critical, it's so crucial that his efforts would have been very much, much more effective, I should say, towards going something towards like Moana 2 than they would have been towards Mufasa. It was always a weird thing that Lin-Manuel Miranda wasn't commissioned by Disney to handle either both films, or if you're going to pick one Moana was definitely the favorite candidate, I would say. But
Right,
maybe it's
and I
just
would
me.
agree with that. And I've only heard one song from Mufasa so far, and it doesn't pique my interest so far. It is interesting to me that the Mufasa trailer did play on the beginning of Moana 2. We are going to be talking a little bit about my thoughts on Moana 2 here, which I did go see with my family, or most of my family. It was a dad night here. Uh, Mufasa, the new trailer plays a lot of music from the original Lion King, which, if you are going to do a prequel to the quote unquote live action, or I'm going to say photorealistic remake of the original Lion King, yes, you should definitely be pushing for something that reminds people of the original, what is it, 1995 animated classic. I'm sure I've got that year wrong. Doesn't matter. The thing I want to talk about here with Moana very quickly is that this is a film that started life as a Disney Plus television series, which that bar is not very high. I'm not saying anything about the quality of the people working on it. Budget constraints would probably be in line with something that goes on Disney Plus, which is also a bit of a mixed bag there because sometimes they release things that have reasonable budgets on Disney Plus, and sometimes we hear about things like The Acolyte, which somehow cost 200 to 250, maybe $300 million for The Acolyte. That is supposed to be a big premiere series. So depending on how Disney viewed Moana, the budget could be all over the place for Moana 2. At some point, they decided, okay, Moana is the biggest show and biggest movie in streaming, bar none. Not biggest movie on Disney Plus, which it is, of course, but the biggest movie in streaming, at least in the United States, maybe globally. So they wanted to do something with Moana. They had a gap in the schedule this November, and also they needed to get massive numbers off of the Disney Plus books so that they could say that this thing is profitable. Because currently on a in the streaming service that costs billions of dollars for Disney, they are currently have profits of millions here with an M, and not many millions when it comes down to it. So getting something off of the books like Moana is very important to the Disney company. So this is
Yeah.
something that was a wise decision for Disney to do this, but we don't know how much it cost. We don't know what the marketing is. So if we presume that the rush cost them money because they had two animation studios at least working on this at the end there of the 6 months or so that we assume that it took for them to actually make this film. They also had to sign The Rock immediately because I'm sure that was a television contract if he was involved and not a movie contract. So he's going to want that money, as well as Ali Cravalho, who presumably was also not signed for a movie. So the announcement of this being turned into a movie came shortly before the announcement that, oh, yes, we've also signed Ali Cravalho. Oh, also, we've signed The Rock. There was also director changes here. It went from being something that was directed by one person to being directed by three people, one of those people having worked on the live action Moana that is supposedly wrap filming at this point. It sounds like it wrapped filming right after those pictures of The Rock came out. So I would
Hmm.
not be surprised if this movie cost $250 million to make for an animated picture, and then they spent a lot of money in order to market it. If we go by ballpark figures, I am not a box office analyst when we talk about these things, but if you say that it has to make twice its marketing and budget together, I'm not sure that at the 717 million mark in global, because again, it's a smaller percentage overseas, an even smaller percentage in China. I am not sure that Moana 2 made money for the Disney company.
Yeah, we really don't know what that budget is at all going to be because, well, I think two animation studios, as you beautifully pointed out, contributed to it. The Vancouver studio and also to the Burbank studio. Three directors. I mean, it's all over the place in terms of this specific production. And I'm sure Disney is doing some strange things with the accounting as well, as this was originally slated for Disney Plus, now going to theaters. It's interesting. A couple things. One, Lion King like 94, interestingly enough. And two, oh, you said something there. I'll think about it later. But Moana 2. Here you go. This is what gives us pause about this specific production, because it continues to perform below expectations. Luis Fernando again, Moana 2 is back at number 1 at the box office, but with a very tight margin. You got to think about the actual films that were in theaters at the time. tight margin. Not quite what you want to see. The animation scored strong $6 million on biggest third Friday post-Thanksgiving animations, dropping minus 48.5% from last Friday. Now, to contrast those numbers and to give you some context, versus 2016 Moana, 4.2 million. That was only a drop of 35.7%. Frozen only dropped 24%, and Frozen 2 only dropped 44%. You can kind of see there that it still continues to underperform, especially related to some of the previous Thanksgiving record breakers for Disney. And you can see this illustrated as well. If we go to the numbers right here, you can see this kind of this graph that we have, and that kind of wavy line that you see above those actual recorded actual box office showings. Well, that's kind of its area of expectation when it came to analysts, high projection and low projection, and it keeps hitting that low end of that figure. So again, this is the Walt Disney Company, I think, capitalizing on successes of its past, actually, that the modern iteration of the Walt Disney Company could never achieve on its own. I think that's what's actually going on here.
I totally agree. And having watched the film, and I suppose this is the part at which I talk about Moana 2. So if you have any ideas about spoilers for Moana 2, well, skip ahead to the part where you like and subscribe on this video. Moana 2 is not a great film. It is about as good as you can be without me saying it's a bad film. Here, it's weird, and I would compare it in some ways to The Emperor's New School, or the Young Hercules animated series, or even the Aladdin animated series from back in the day. It's just strange enough, and it looks like it was set up to have continuing adventures. I'm not trying to be insulting to the people who did this, because it is a miracle that they got this thing to the state that it was in the short period of time that they got it to. In the middle of a change at the top of Walt Disney Animation, Jared Bush is now in charge of Walt Disney Animation. Jennifer Lee is now working solely on Frozen films. She was the head of Disney Animation, and now she is under the head of Disney Animation. You can gather from that what is reasonable to gather from that. This is a film that is very much dependent on the first film, and you would probably have no interest in this film if you are an adult and have not watched the original. It's kind of like that line in the second Pirates of the Caribbean film where he says, "Why is the rum always gone?" As if that's supposed to make the audience cheer. I get it. It's kind of a funny joke, but there's a lot of that in this movie. It has gone from a thing where Moana is the center of the story to Moana is now a celebrity. Everyone who wanted her, like her father in the first film, and I've had to watch the first film twice now since I watched Moana 2, because my kids, good on you, Disney. You made a film that made kids interested in Moana again. It is a really well done film, Moana 1. And Moana 2 has the same characters in it and reminds people of how much they love the first Moana. The first Moana is a little girl on an island. She's going to be the next chief. The chief is trying to train her into this role. She's not going to be perfect in the role, but you can see that she is on her way to doing that thing. She still got her I wants. By the way, Moana has like 3 I want songs in a row. You have the dad's I want song, talking about what the island wants from Moana. You have Moana's How Far I'll Go. And then you have the community's I Want song in We Know the Way. And all 3 of those songs are fantastic. They're great songs. And that's before you even get to You're Welcome here. So great songs. And when you look at Beyond, the title track of Moana 2, it's okay. It doesn't have that Polynesian flair. It's also a lot of Moana emoting against backgrounds. So I'm going to say that this is the kind of thing that Walt Disney himself never would have accepted. There's a reason that Snow White ended up costing as much as it did for the company. He would have been personally bankrupted if Snow White didn't happen. I don't mean to compare Moana 2 to Snow White, but I will compare Moana 2 to Cars 2. It's a little worse than Cars 2, in fact. It's so weird. It's so strange. All of a sudden, Maui has gone from a character who leans on the fourth wall a little bit because he's making jokes that like you understand that they're references to modern things, to all of a sudden he's like the genie where he understands what's going to be going on in 2000 years. Like, I'm sorry, is Maui a time traveler? And it also, and again, heavy spoilers here when I say this, Moana dies in the film and is brought back to life as a demigod and then just goes back to living her life. So I don't understand what this movie is supposed to be if it's anything other than corporate product. It bothers me from a storytelling standpoint to have a character who is the main character in her story to going to being the center of the entire world. It's so weird. It's so strange. I hope that my children don't take any moral lessons from it because they're weird and vague, as opposed to the first one, which is like got strong ties to family, the coming of age aspects of it, and the fact that people have to forge their own path while still honoring the legacy of what came before. And maybe honoring that legacy means forging your own path. Great messages in that first film. And this one is just oof. I probably don't need to talk about it for an extended period of time here, as I already have done a little bit here. But the main point, and I put a long tweet out talking about this over there on X. The main point that I see here is between Inside Out 2 and Moana 2, Disney has cashed in on previous successes in a big way. With Inside Out 2, they made buckets of money on that thing. And Moana 2 probably saved Walt Disney Animation and caused them to have to make some changes at the top that I think are favorable. I have a lot of confidence that Jared Bush is going to do well in his chance at the top of Walt Disney Animation Studios here. I just really hope that this is not an indication of what we're going to be getting from Disney going forward. But right now, the next things on the slate: Zootopia 2, Incredibles 3, Frozen 3, Toy Story 5, Moana live action, and Frozen 4. And those are just the ones that we are officially aware of. Disney
Right.
is still working on sequels that have not been announced. I know it because things are in development. Things are in development at Disney for a very long time. So, Disney, please do not stop here. And also, we need to understand that Moana 2 maybe didn't make money. Vash, you have anything you want to throw in here?
No, I think you're spot on here. We also heard about a live action Tangled as well. Again,
Ugh.
this is the company capitalizing on previous successes. And again, I want to attribute that point squarely on your shoulders right there. I think your tweet was actually brilliant in laying this out because, I mean, look at the original Moana, for instance. You had John Musker, you had Ron Clements directing that film. You had John Lasseter heavily involved. And, well, as Alan Ings from Film Threat, that is, D-Files points out, you know, as they push out the old white guys, we see the quality diminish there at Disney Animation. And I think Moana 2 is really representative of that whole thing going down. Also, too, it's also representative of the priorities of the company, right? I mean, they were very heavily prioritizing Disney Plus until they weren't. And now we have to, you know, take these films and essentially redo them in order to make them theatrically ready. And well, now we're left in this kind of very interesting area in which Moana 2 isn't necessarily as great as I think people expected that it would be, especially following such a highly successful film in the original Moana. And now we have Bob Iger kind of doubling down on this principle of like, okay, let's cash in on our already established IPs and franchises, because I think even he understands and recognizes that the creative output of the company just isn't there like it was perhaps even 10 years ago.
Yeah. I would compare this to someone looking at their power bill and their credit card bill and saying, well, we can't pay both. And so they pay their power bill with their credit card and then they make their payment on their credit card. This to me is definitely not where you need to stop. And Disney, please keep moving forward. And also, I appreciate the fact that there's not much divisive stuff in here. The only divisive thing about this is the level of quality, which needs to go up. By the way, animation is back to where it needs to be. You guys definitely need more time in the shoot on whatever this is. Also, there seems to be an indication that you're going to do a Moana 3. And I cringe at the end of this, where all of a sudden you have a god who is very focused on this Moana character. It's so strange. And it seems like they're going to be doing like a Pacific Islander Avengers with demigods all centered around Moana. It's so weird.
That's what I was going to bring up actually earlier. Yeah, we have the company continually mining these franchises, even in the form of the Moana live action right after Moana 2 came out, which is really bizarre, really interesting. You talked about how initial, filming had wrapped on that. I think we call that principal photography, and we call it principal photography for a reason because, well, we just still haven't seen the reshoots come in. That's what I was going to say before. So we'll have to see on all of that. But the company in a very strange place right now when it comes to their franchises and maybe not establishing new ones.
Well, I am sure that those in the comments have some comments here for us. So please drop them down below. We do read all of them. Like this video, of course, if you found it helpful in any way. And if you haven't, consider subscribing to That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.